Ensuring the common good for all in Bowling Green, the Code Enforcement Division is committed to providing a safe, healthy, and attractive place to live. Designed to respond to citizens' concerns that affect the quality of life in Bowling Green, Code Enforcement addresses urban blight, nuisances, zoning, and property maintenance regulations through a set of national, state, and local ordinances. In this edition of Spotlight on Bowling Green, we'll take a look at the various codes that make up the division and how code enforcement works to enrich our community every day.
Code enforcement is under the Neighborhood and Community Services branch. We're a group of employees that go around the city looking for code violations. The history of code enforcement began probably back in the late 80s. It's comprised of maybe one officer at that time. Truly just complaint-based. They might have done 200 to 300 complaints at that time. Probably in the middle 2000s, we went to a four-person team. Today we're doing about 3,000 average, 3,000 complaints or records a year. 300 of those might be complaints, everything else is proactive enforcement.
The type of codes that we enforce basically fall into two different categories. One is structural violations, which have to do with existing buildings. It can be interior or on the exterior of the buildings, which can consist of tenant complaints on the interior and issues of structural defects on the outsides of the buildings. The other is non-structural violations, which is basically everything else from overgrown grass to junk, trash, and other areas of the exterior of the properties. It's important because in code enforcement, one of our biggest missions is to increase the curb appeal of the neighborhoods, not only for the people that live in the neighborhoods, but also to people that visit our community, and to keep the property values as high as possible.
Some of the violation types that we actually enforce are either city ordinances and or property maintenance code book. Those property maintenance are the same ones that are used throughout the United States. We won't enforce rules from subdivisions. We do get calls from that from time to time, but we do not enforce those. That's a private entity itself and more of a civil issue at that point.
When a complaint is submitted to the Code Enforcement Division, there's a formal process to determine the validity of the complaint and to bring a property back up to code if a violation has occurred.
The complaints from citizens will come into City Central, and then they will be assigned to a code enforcement officer that works that particular area. We will call the complainant after we have inspected the property and let them know what we're doing on the property. If we find violations, a notice of violation is sent to the property owner, and the property owner is given a predetermined amount of time to correct the violations. If those violations are corrected, then the case is closed. If they are not, we will issue a citation, and based upon what the complaint is, we may even abate the violation, or we may give another period of time before we issue a second citation.
The Code Enforcement Board comprised of 5 citizens throughout Bowling Green. They are appointed by the mayor, and the Board of Commissioners approves the appointments. They hear the complaints from people that want to appeal their code enforcement violations through the board. Through that, the board determines whether they should either pay a steeper fine, give them additional time to get a violation corrected, or another alternative if one is available for them.
Any violations that we find on properties, even if these are rental properties, the tenant can choose to remedy the violations, but in the end, it's always the property owner that is responsible for his property.
The Code Enforcement Division strives to educate the public on common code violations, as well as perceived violations that code enforcement officers have no power to enforce.
Some of the most common violations that we deal with are overgrown yards. We have an ordinance that limits the height of grass in the city of Bowling Green to 10 inches. Anything above that is in violation, and we send out notices to inform the property owners that they need to cut the grass.
We have lots of complaints through those from about April to October. Primarily that's a complaint. After that would probably be junk and debris and trash. That's throughout the year, but primarily grass is our biggest complaint.
We also have a new ordinance involving parking in yards, and we're educating the public by sending out notices to them to let them know that parking at residential structures must be on an improved structure, such as gravel if it exists there, asphalt, brick, concrete pavers, and places such as that. We also enforce tire removal. There's no outdoor storage of tires on properties in the city of Bowling Green. There are certain conditions that we as the Code Enforcement Division are not tasked to enforce. Some people complain about aesthetic places in their community that they don't approve of house colors, or they don't approve of yard ornaments or kids' toys in the yard. And these are all things that we can't regulate through code. Another common complaint that we get is overgrown bushes and shrubbery in yards and residences in the neighborhoods. We currently do not have a code that covers that. The city has an ordinance if it does affect public ways, sidewalks, streets, and things of that nature. But the mere fact that they're overgrown and unsightly in someone's opinion is not something that we as a Code Enforcement Division can enforce.
The goal of the Code Enforcement Division is to be proactive with code violations before they become a public nuisance. One of the ways they achieve this is by implementing target areas and target zones.
We're on a pace to do about 5,000, 6,000 records this year. Only about 300 of those are actually complaints. Everything else is proactive. Target areas are predetermined portions of the city that we go around different times of the year and give services out to people, citizens, to get things abated, such as trash removal, debris removal. Sometimes it could be involved with paintings, making handicap ramps sometimes. But it's an assortment of free services that the city utilizes and gives out to help people get their violations abated.
The target area program was designed so as to increase the curb appeal of the neighborhoods, and also to provide some services for the property owners that may be out of their financial reach. Letters go out to the property owners, and a card is also sent to the tenants in the rental properties. We have what's called a service week, where we send our contractors through that neighborhood to pick up anything that they have put out for us to pick up. If they can't get it to the road, then we can have our contractors go on the property and clean it up. Then after that, the code enforcement officers go through the neighborhood and do inspections, and any violations that are left, we address.
Target zones, we use those as an area of town that may be getting a lot of complaints, and through those complaints, we saturate the area with all 4 of our officers, code enforcement officers. We tried to get as many violations corrected as possible throughout the area, since there's been a lot of complaints in that particular area.
Other responsibilities of the Code Enforcement Division include enforcement of the temporary sign ordinance and the inspection of Section 8 rental properties.
We have an established ordinance that regulates the signage, and I am assigned inspections to go by and check on folks that have permitted signs, and to make sure that they are properly placed and not affecting traffic and the safety of the citizens of Bowling Green. Temporary signage is restricted to the businesses where the advertisement is taking place, and they're not allowed to put signs throughout the community on other lots or on city right-of-ways. Signs must be permitted, and this is a way of regulating the number of signs and also the location of the signs to ensure that the aesthetics of our community are maintained and that we don't have a lot of this scattered throughout the community. The city has a program where there's government subsidized housing vouchers issued to persons in the community that qualify. And they go out and find a location where they would like to live, and we as inspectors go in and make sure that The conditions in these properties meet a minimum criteria established by the government, and we ensure that those conditions are met and that the place is a safe and sanitary housing unit for those persons to occupy. Within every 2 years, we make a reinspection to the property to see that the owners have kept the property up and to see that the tenants have maintained their part of keeping the property in good condition.
The Code Enforcement Division works closely with the Bowling Green Police Department and the Bowling Green Fire Department to ensure the safety and welfare of its citizens.
The police department is comprised of somewhere around 100 officers that are out and about throughout the community. And it's kind of an extra set of eyes for us. In the course of their duties, they often find substandard housing, abandoned housing, people living in unsanitary conditions or unsafe conditions, and they report these incidents to us, and we in turn investigate and handle those within the scope of our authority and the authority given to us in the city code and ordinances. In addition, we often require them to come by if we find an abandoned structure that we're going to board up to make it safe for the community. We ask them to go through the structure, make sure that there are no persons or animals inside the structure before we board it up. And on certain occasions, we also ask that they stand by when we have some unfavorable circumstances that we have to deal with in the course of our enforcement activities. The fire department, in the course of their actions, they conduct random inspections on multifamily units within the city of Bowling Green. When they are inside these residences and they notice substandard housing issues, they'll notify us of these violations, and we'll follow them within the scope of our code to see that those things are corrected. Also, they're involved with one of our inspectors in doing the university review, where they go by and do inspections on the sororities and fraternity houses within the university district, and they do this on an annual basis. In the course of their activities, when they respond to fire calls, they often file fire reports on severely damaged properties that are forwarded to us, and we have an inspector that's assigned to follow up on that and contact the owners to notify them of any permits that they may need or ways that they need to secure the property so that it is safe for the citizens until the property can be repaired.
In any given day, code enforcement officers may function as problem solvers, communicators, mediators, researchers, and educators. Their importance to the city of Bowling Green and its citizens cannot be understated.
Throughout the years, the city has grown, and in the growing of the city, standards have changed and conditions have changed, and our enforcement activities have progressed to the point that we have a little more enforcement ability, and we're able to do more to make the community a nicer place to live. Folks coming into our community are often looking for the conditions of the neighborhoods, conditions of the streets and schools and things of that nature. So our activities have helped promote the prosperity of the city by making it a more aesthetically pleasing place for people to come visit and live.
If you'd like to learn more about this or any other Spotlight on Bowling Green program, contact City Hall at 270-393-3000.